Now, Rock Talk with Mitch Lafon.
We are speaking with Aldo Nova. Good day.
Hi, Mitch. How are you?
Pleasure. I'm doing well, actually.
That's good.
These wonderful COVID times. We're here to talk about the life and times of Eddie Gage, the rock opera.
Right.
It is something that you have been working on for over a decade.
12 years.
12 years, written over 100 songs for.
Mm-hmm.
Talk to me about what makes now the apropos time and actually getting it down to, from 100 songs to the 10, 12 that we're going to have.
Well, I already had the idea in 2008 to do it, and I already had written a bunch of songs.
Right.
And then in 2008, I went into Planet Studios, and I said, listen, can you give me some time? Because my studio, I was just come back from Ireland, so none of this was set up. So I went in there with a drummer, and I just played everything and the tracks, and then I had about 8 songs, and then over the years I wrote more songs. But then when I was finishing the album, which I finished just in May of this year, I realized that some of those original songs just needed to be touched up, redone vocals and stuff like that. But over the years I'd written about 100 songs. So as I wrote a new song, another song would get scrapped. I wrote another song would get scrapped. So actually the basic songs for the album were written in 2008, 2013, 2015, and just 2019, and even the last song, when all it's said and done, was written on May 12th and released on May 29th. So.
Right. In terms of the concept, what is sort of the life, who is Eddie Gage, essentially?
Eddie Gage is actually my alter ego, so his life pretty much mirrors mine. I mean, Eddie Gage is a very young, talented musician, hotshot guitar player that gets signed to a record company, and his life goes up, rise to fame, down. But it's like light and dark. It's not like, it's more about, he's light, the dark tries to take him over, and then comes back, and discovers redemption. But when I say dark, I mean like hidden antichrists, devils, gods, but under different names. So.
Yeah, so let me take up on the light and dark theme. In terms of messaging, is there a religious connotation to it? Is there just that's the way of the world? Is always sort of good versus evil? Is he fighting somebody in a sense?
Well, it's more the light and the dark, which exists everywhere since the dawn of time. It's about light falling into darkness and eventually finding redemption back into the light, which is important. I guess it has spiritual qualities to it, because I figured that you have to look at it that way.
Right.
But in other words, if I said a devil, to me it meant a record company executive. So in other words, like the song you heard upstairs, Hey Lottie Dottie, the guy's a record company exec, but he has higher aspirations. So he sings about a new world order, and I'll pretend to be a new messiah and things like that. So.
Now, with over 100 songs written, is this sort of the first collection of many, or did you have to write 100 to get the proper ones that go on this album?
I had to write 100.
Okay.
I didn't stop anyway for over 12 years. And in 2008, I made a conscious decision not to work, write, or do anything for any other artist but myself. I had enough in 2008. I did everything I could for other artists, but I figured that at that point I was going to work for me.
Right. In fact, let me take up on the working for me thing, because when Twitch came out, one of the complaints was that there was too many guys on it. You had Alan Schwartzberg, you had Anton Fig, you had all kinds of people. Talk to me about the importance of getting your vision on tape for the fans and not having, too many people involved, too many hands in the pie.
Well, you talk about drummers, and I never could play drums.
Right.
For the life of me, I can play anything, but drums, I just can't get a handle on it. So Alan Schwartzberg and those guys weren't the problem. The problem was the record company. Since I did my first album, which did amazingly well, then I did Subject, which was actually really radical for back then. People just now are starting to realize that Subject is like a pretty a record that was way ahead of its time.
Right.
So, but since subject didn't do as well because I went like completely opposite to the mainstream. And there, they said, well, okay, the next record, we're gonna, be in control.
Right.
So rather than making me do what I want and having me write my own songs, they would actually have me do covers. So in some of the songs, like Heartless and Long Hot Summer, I had nothing to do with the writing, not the lyrics, not the music, anything. So I felt like a stranger in my hometown.
Wow.
I mean, this was not Aldo Nova that you're listening to.
That's interesting. So how important then is it to be in control of the vision? Because there are a lot of bands where, they come in and somebody does all the songwriting, or today you have 12 people write one song. How important is it for you to have that vision and that control?
For me, it's very important.
Right.
I mean, first of all, I'm a control freak, but I'm a control freak.
You're controlled freak.
I mean, back in the 80s and 90s, I mean, they used to call me like I was severe. I mean, it was like my way or the highway. Over the years, what I've discovered is that I work with people at my level, and I don't like any interference whatsoever. Not interference in the sense, I don't like stress. You know what I mean? So I've learned that to work with where it's effortless, you have to work with people at your level.
Right.
So that when you send them something, like the drummer, they'll send you something back that's like, wow, you're like excited to listen to it. So that's what happens with the musicians I work with.
Musically, for fans that know you from Fantasy, that know you from Blood on the Bricks, what is the new rock opera going to deliver? Are they going to get sort of those pop hits, or is it a darker album? Musically, where did we go?
We'll go everywhere from rock, like you heard upstairs, to I've always been known as the great ballad, so there'll be like a great rock ballad on it. But it's different. It's not like the kind of ballad which like A, B. In the album, I don't really tend to write in chords, but in chromatics.
Right.
I'll tend to write single notes, but do chromatically. And they'll have even like R&B stuff on it with like no guitars whatsoever. There'll be 40-piece orchestras with one voice.
Wow.
There'll be hip, like techno. It's like an album that will have something for everybody. It'll probably get slammed by the critics as usual, but I mean,
we don't need critics.
People will love it because it's a rock solid album. It's got the best of everything, the best playing. My voice is still there for 64. Actually, I've never sang better. I've never been in better shape. And so everything is top notch. The playing is top notch. The mixing, which I did myself. I did pretty much everything myself. But over the years, I've gotten to be much better at it.
Right.
Yeah, I learned. So the mixing is great. And of course, like I said, I put the cherry on top, and Bob Ludwig put the mastering. Who's a fan?
Who's a big fan? So after 12 years, first of all, how do you sort of decide that, okay, now it's done, and then what's next for you? Do you go back to making albums like the first one with songs like Fantasy, or do you go back to making a Blood on Bricks, or do you go, okay, let's start the next rock opera?
I think that, I don't know.
Right.
I don't have a clue. I really don't know. I think music for me is like something that has to stir the emotions.
Right.
So something that's going to be, something that's going to hit you in the chest like a cannon, yet something that'll move something in you. So when I hit it, I mean, with Eddie Gage, I wasn't satisfied because I kept writing different parts of the stories because there's characters like in it. And so I always found I didn't need that. I'm missing one character. I was missing something that was going to bring it like home. So that's why the last song was written on May 12th, even though the album was finished, mastered in September 2019.
Right. So you sent them a new track. Now, you also had Aldo Nova 2.0. You were going to go out and do some shows. You hadn't done some shows in a while. COVID put a damper on that. Talk to me a little bit about what that means, and also getting back to the live stage and going back to performing.
I would have loved to go back live. I mean, like I said, I'm in the best shape of my life, mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually. So I have a great band together. We had everything booked. I had booked the flights. I had the shows booked. I had the rehearsal hall booked. I had the Airbnb booked. Everything was booked. And then at a certain point, they just cut it, and the borders were closed, and then the shows were canceled, and I couldn't do it. But I'm dying to go back on stage.
I mean, it was the moment, and then it got cut down. Let's quickly go back to some of the earlier stuff you've done with John Bon Jovi. As a Bon Jovi fan, I have to ask, but you did play on that first record. You had a relationship with Tony Bon Jovi. How did that develop into you having that time to play on the first album? Were you doing a favor for Tony? Was it, hey, I like what John's doing? How did that relationship start?
Well, when I met John, I was working in Studio A with Tony mixing,
right,
while we were mixing it together. And John, the coffee machine was about, you'd open the door and the coffee machine would be there. So I met him, he was just a kid over there by the coffee machine, and I didn't know people. The rumor goes that he's a janitor, but I'm not so sure what he was. But he'd hang around by the coffee machine.
Right.
So one day I said, do you want to come in and listen to some stuff? So I played him, songs like Fantasy, and it sounded like a canon. I mean, with Tony Bon Jovi, he's like, he designed the power station, so
right,
he's got a particular sound. He's not, Tony now invented the new speakers that are, the sound comes from a wall. There's no woofer. They have them in the new cars, yeah. They have them in jets to reduce the weight. So he's a genius. So anyway, getting back to Bon Jovi, I brought him in to listen to the album, and he just flipped, obviously. But then his cousin, Tony, had all the connections. So they wanted to do a song called Runaway. So Tony put together the Salt Story Band with Roy Bittan on piano, another guy on keyboards.
Hugh McDonald?
Hugh McDonald on bass, which just played on all the Bon Jovi records.
Hasn't missed one.
What?
He hasn't missed one.
He hasn't missed one.
Nope.
No, even from the beginning to all of them. Even though Alec John Such he was in the band, he never played on a record.
Yep.
There was Huey McDonald, there was Tim Pierce on guitar, myself on guitar. Yeah, Tim Pierce is a mother.
Who was on drum? Was it Chris Burton?
It was, no, what was his name? Frankie LaRocca was on drums. And that was the band. And so we cut Runaway live. And then Tim went back and cut his solo. A lot of people, rumor has it that it's me playing the solo, but it's Tim Pierce that's actually playing the solo. And John sang, redid his vocal, and then Lance Quinn produced it. And then after that, when I remember being in the office of Mercury, and Derek Shulman was there from Gentle Giant. Actually was sitting in the chair, and I'm the only guy who knew Gentle Giant. So I shot the shit about Gentle Giant together, and I actually said, I'll do whatever it takes to help him out. And then the record came. We were cutting the record, and I did all these background vocals on it with him, and I played some keyboards. So that's about it.
Right, and then so let me move over to Twitch. We spoke quickly about it, that you weren't happy with the way the record company had sort of set it out. You come back to Montreal, you asked to be let out of your contract, and you come back to here and you start doing TV work and jingle work. Talk to me about that. Was that sort of rewarding that you got to come back and do your own thing, or was there a bit of a frustration of like, hey, I'm not making Aldo Nova records, I'm still working? Talk to me about that sort of period of time where you came back and said, okay, I'm done with Portrait. I'm done with...
Yeah, I was done with Portrait. That's why I came back to Montreal.
Right. My
mind was made up that I was never going to work for a record company, that I didn't have control over my own records or artistic control. So came back to Montreal, moved here, got an apartment, was able to build a studio in the apartment. So it was an apartment, but it was soundproof. So I was able to... Well, you heard I left.
Yeah, you love to play.
I had concert level volumes, so I went there. I started making jingles for Chrysler, Coca-Cola, and I did really well at them. So the A&R of
and by the way, there is a lot of money to be made in that. I mean, it's not to be scoffed at. It's a real industry.
A shitload of money.
Yeah.
I mean, I was making more money then than I'm making now. That's for sure.
So, but also it ultimately ends up working out for you because you're introduced to Celine Dion and you
Exactly.
get to. So, how does that introduction come? Does René Angélil know you from the industry and say, "Come on out"? How does that work?
That was the A&R of Sony, CBS back then, Vito Loprano, that actually introduced me because we had a history, and she came into my studio, and I'd already written one song that I'd done with another artist called "On traverse un miroir," and she loved that song. So then I produced that for her, and 2 more tracks. One which I wrote called "Have a Heart," which was called "Partager de voix," and another song, "C'est quoi l'amour," and that was incognito, the record, which actually got her launched.
Right.
But "Have a Heart" was a song that actually got her break on her English, why she got signed. So, and I forget what year.
Did you help her develop the English side? Because she was a very francophone artist.
Of course, yeah.
Okay.
I mean, that song, I coached her, and she went on the Junos and performed it, and that's when they actually decided to sign her as an artist in English.
Is there, and this might sound like an educated kind of question, but is there a difference in the approach when you're doing a French language song and an English language song? Do you approach it the same way, or is it written differently? If you understand what I mean, is it a different approach, different mentality?
Well, the lyrics are a lot different. I mean, they'll take English lyrics and, like, if Luc Plamondon takes a song that's English, he'll make it. He'll just like repeat words, and they'll turn the phrases to make them more colorful. And I don't know. Like some art. I think Luc Plamondon is good, and there's some artists, but they don't really have the. It's not quite as hard as English. English is much more emotive. You know what I mean? It's much more expressive. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and French is a little bit more romanticized, if you want.
Yeah.
Getting back to the life and times of Eddie Gage, when it comes to the recording process, how do you sort of get the song down? Are you still old school, where you just sort of set up and play it once and that's done, or are you all about the Pro Tools? Are you all about the bells and whistles? How do you sort of approach getting the song to tape?
Well, I'm the kind of guy that I write the song on the guitar or the piano, and if the song doesn't hold up with just a song and a piano or a guitar, then the song isn't good.
Okay.
So
everything has to work acoustically first before it gets to that next stage.
To be a song, I mean, I'm actually a songwriter first. Right. So I write the song musically. I'll be driving, and I'll get an idea. Then I'll come home and flesh it out. And then after that, I write the lyrics, and then I'll either that or I'll take all the music, but I have a good idea of the title, and then I'll go and I'll write tracks. And I use Logic, and then I'll do an elaborate demo of it, which sounds like a record.
Right.
And then I'll send it down to a drummer in Miami. And then I also have a guitar player, which played great guitar, called Dan Warner, who passed away last year, who used to do rhythm guitars and extremely colorful sounds that like really brought the song to life.
Right.
And so, I mean, they were like my guys. I mean, I used to send them tracks of my demos, and they send them back, and it was like, wow, I'm excited. I was excited to have music from this guy, and it wasn't a letdown.
Right.
So, and then the song builds from there. And then I replaced all the electronics with the real stuff. The Eddie Gage album has no, apart from synthesizer parts that I want, has no machines on it. It's all acoustic. Most of the songs have no click tracks. There's just
really?
A ballad, sometimes if you play to a click track, you can't, it's square. You know what I mean?
Right.
It's just like, so music has to breathe. So, so a lot of the stuff I ended up doing with just the piano and the vocal all the way through, and then the tracks were built all around that.
Right. Yeah. I agree that songs need some space. Otherwise, it's too much information. Just going back quickly to John Bon Jovi, real quick. Blaze of Glory, of course, the Young Guns movie. How involved were you in that process? Obviously, you played on some of the tracks, but did you write most of the tracks? And
No, there was no writing. It was the first record where John actually wrote every song by himself.
Okay.
I mean, he always had co-writers in the past, whether it be Richie, whether it be Desmond Child. When it came to that album, he actually, like, I played the cassette of Blaze of Glory.
Yeah.
It was actually him. He had written the words and the music. And so with that little cassette, I went to home on Friday, and he needed it by Monday morning. So I actually played all the instrument, the slide guitar, and the actual finished record sounds exactly like that record.
Right.
So then I went to John's house, and he had another 10 songs. So I sat in his basement slaving away with a console for 3 weeks, doing all the rest of the demos. And then we flew to Los Angeles, and we got an all-star band with Kenny Aronoff on drums, Randy Jackson of the
American Idol.
The American Idol.
Journey.
Yeah, exactly. Who's an amazing bass player.
And Journey now. He's back in Journey.
Ben Montench of the Heartbreakers on organ. Waddy Wachtel, who's famous for the Expensive Winos with Keith Richards, and me on guitar.
Wow.
So
great band.
A great band. Yeah. And Little Richard came to play on one track.
Can't go wrong there.
Jeff Beck on guitar, so you can't go wrong.
Can't go wrong there. We'll wrap up on this. The release for Eddie Gage is, from what I understand, you're going to put out a song on Spotify or a song on streaming once a month, once every couple of months, and run it through until 2021. Talk to me about that approach. It's smart in the sense that it keeps the listener always engaged. But it is different. So talk to me about that decision to go sort of one at a time and just let people get it slowly.
Well, with that, at the end, it'll keep people interested. You know,
Engaged.
It'll keep them engaged, actually. And anyway, at that rate, with 23 songs in August of 2021, I'll still be putting out songs.
Right.
So the record after that, they'll get it in one shot. Unless situation changes really in the world, where music come back to normal and situation come back to normal. The record, like I said, I recorded it in 12 years. I'm in no hurry to put it out.
No hurry to put it out.
Exactly.
In terms of Spotify, though, with the artists, there's a lot of debate about how Spotify doesn't treat artists well. Is that something you worry about or think about, or just go, you know what, just put the song on there and whatever?
It's been years that you don't make money in music.
Right.
You know? I mean, my royalties, even though I have like 15 songs with Celine Dion, because the physical format is gone, ever since they switched to digital and YouTube and Spotify and Apple Music, like on 2.0, I have my own record company now because nobody owns my publishing, nobody owns the artist, nobody owns the record company.
Right.
I own everything. I wrote all the songs, So I mean, if let's take the 2.0 record, which I was making most of the money on.
Right.
If an album sold 800 copies, I would, at $10 a copy, I would make $8,395 US. Whereas if it sold 800 copies on Apple Music, I would make $176. So
big difference.
I mean, well, iTunes takes 30% off the top.
Right.
So Spotify pays nothing. It's 0.000001 of a penny per stream. So my royalty rates went down. I mean,
Yeah, you can't make a living being a songwriter anymore. You came through at the right time in the 80s and 90s.
Exactly. Like I said, now I have I made a deal. I sold some of my catalog, so I have a little bit of a cushion for once in my life. I mean, in 2008, it was either I'm going to starve and we'll get back to what I was doing, or, whore myself out again and make some money. But I didn't need the stress. I mean, it's like, anyway, people, you write the songs, you produce, and most of the time, like with Celine, you have to give her like elaborate demos, and she basically copies it like that. So,
right.
So I said I'd rather start, and I did. So.
But you're here and you got this beautiful studio.
I've got my gear. That's the thing. I've always been top-notch gear. I mean, that's the thing. Even though I had no money, I had gear.
Oh, you still got great gear. And as we say, merci, thank you. Great pleasure.
Thank you very much.
Cheers.
This has been Rock Talk with Mitch Lafon. For more exclusive content and interviews, subscribe on iHeartRadio, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, on YouTube, and many more. Follow Mitch on all the socials, especially Twitter, @Mitch Lafon, and on Instagram, @Mitch_Lafon.